Did you know that nearly 1 in 3 adults don't get enough quality sleep? And when leaders are sleep deprived, it shows up everywhere: lower energy, poor focus, bad moods, and even weaker decision making. That's why today's guest is Mollie Eastman, sleep coach, entrepreneur, and host of the top-rated podcast, Sleep is a Skill. She'll share how to break free from burnout, avoid sleep anxiety, and build the systems that let you recover deeply and perform at your best. Because sleep isn't optional. It's the foundation of leadership, energy, and showing up as your best self. Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Most leaders want to perform at their best, but too often they're sabotaging themselves by ignoring one of the simplest levers of performance: sleep. That's why I'm excited to introduce my friend and today's guest, Mollie Eastman. She's a leading sleep coach, entrepreneur, and host of the top-rated podcast, Sleep is a Skill. Mollie has helped thousands of high performers and organizations transform their results by mastering sleep. Not with gimmicks, but with science, data, and real-world tools. What makes Mollie unique is her honesty. She's lived through burnout herself, rebuilt her own systems, and now shares exactly how leaders can avoid the same traps. If you want more energy, sharper focus, and higher performance without burning out, you'll want to hear this entire conversation. Thanks for being on today, Mollie.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be awesome. Every time I recently recorded a podcast with your husband, Blake, and we're all friends. We're all in the same group. And every time I feel like we're at one of these masterminds, we get together, we just always end up like huddled in a corner, chatting with each other until they kick us out.
Exactly. I know. And we have such shared passions also, thankfully, on the topic of sleep optimization, health optimization, ways that you can up-level in all areas. So love that you're prioritizing this and really creating a platform to be able to share about this information because so many people don't realize.
It's so important. And it's, it's funny, last time we had that one of those, I guess, dinners after a mastermind, it was like just you and my wife, Madison, like sitting there, comparing like whatever, like we were like Whoop scores basically the whole time of like talking about different things. And because we do prioritize this is something that, and with my clients is something, I prioritize as well. But again, I think what I love about what you do, and one of the reasons it makes you so unique is that you have such a strong, scientific foundation in what you do, but such an experiential understanding of why this is important. And, you built your whole career around sleep in response to some pretty serious health issues early in your life. So why don't you tell me, why is sleep your thing?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Sleep has definitely become my thing. And, I want to start this too with if anyone's listening and they're dealing, there's kind of two buckets that I like to think about sleep. So one, the bucket of people that might be optimizing. That's kind of, I think the conversation that we were speaking all about is, when we're comparing Whoop and Aura and all these different things, often that's the optimizer. And, you're sleeping, but you're looking to up level. So there's that sort of group, and I work with a lot of those individuals. And then there's also the insomniacs. And so we have a very different way of languaging things for that group commonly. I don't want to make blanket statements, but often I was one of those individuals, which was dealing with insomnia. And so during that period of my life, oh my goodness, the stress that I had around sleep and the sleep anxiety that developed. So that's really a group that there's a period of time where it might not make the most sense to have too much data pulsing their way because now they're so knowledgeable about sleep to the point that it's stressing them out. So they know all the deleterious effects of what can happen when you're not sleeping, day in, day out. And now they're putting so much pressure on themselves, and that performance anxiety is amping up. And I was certainly one of those people. So about a decade ago, went through this whole period of insomnia that this was when traveling internationally. Blake and I have been together almost 14 years or so. And so in somewhat at the beginning of our relationship, we were traveling. If anyone's familiar with Tim Ferriss, we were inspired to bring about that kind of digital nomad lifestyle or traveling, and bringing your business on the road. But the amount of stress that induced, because we weren't quite ready to take our businesses all on the road. For anyone that is an entrepreneur, like the amount of ups and downs that can often come from that period of time. And so, when we landed and we're traveling, so much instability, the way that stress exemplified for me was difficulty night after night sleeping. And at first it was like, oh, well, maybe this is because of jet lag. maybe this will correct itself. And I also did everything not to do during that period of time, which I did not quite realize. So, I would try to sleep as long as possible, any sleep that I could get. I would be spending all this time in bed to try to make sure, oh, let me go to bed really early. Oh, well, the night was really hard, so let me sleep in. And, all the things not to do, but then kept adding more and more pressure. And as the days and nights went on, then I started getting more and more freaked out of like, am I stuck like this? What is happening? And unfortunately, when I went to the doctors, I left with sleeping pills time after time. And if anyone is listening, that is actually not supposed to be first line treatment in the United States. It is supposed to be CBT-I, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is the gold standard first line treatment for insomnia. And yet that is not what I was met with. And unfortunately, that is not always what many people are met with. It might just be, kind of vague recommendations to, have you tried melatonin? Oh, okay, no, well, let's give you some sort of prescriptions pretty quickly thereafter. Unfortunately, often in the domain of Z drugs like Ambiens, maybe venturing into like Lunestas or benzos still, sadly, which is quite antiquated. So Xanax and, Ativan and these things for people to sleep each night, which are not approved for long-term usage. But sadly, we see so many people taking these night after night. So that's what happened to me. So then, week after week, month after month, I'm taking these things and I'm starting getting more and more freaked out that I'm going to be stuck on taking these things. So there seems to be no clear plan and no real strategy or, guidance on what to do. And all too often, that's what we're seeing because even out of Harvard Med, the average doctor is getting about 2 hours of training in sleep. The thing that we do a third of our lives, on average 26 years, are spent to sleep. But the average doctor is just sadly not well versed in that from a primary care perspective or what have you. So that's what we see. And that was what happened for me. Now, flash forward. I come from a family of a lot of pharmaceutical use and mental health issues. So when this was happening for me, it was a fear of like, oh no, am I going to go down that path where I've seen so many of my other family members of then having to take tons and tons of medications just for, day-to-day life. And so the fire was definitely lit from within to figure this out. And so really went down the rabbit hole to discover what does it take to not only restore sleep, but then eventually I'm grateful to say that once I was able to kind of bring back workability in my sleep, eventually down the road to be able to explore sleep optimization. And that often can take some time because you want to rebuild that trust and muscle in your sleep to be able to know that each night you can kind of count onably get that sleep, fall asleep with ease, stay asleep relatively consistently. And then over time, then we can explore this optimization. So this so dramatically changed my entire life that, then Sleep as a Skill was born. So today we have episodes on our podcast of over, I think we're at like 300 episodes with different sleep experts across many fields, many areas that can support sleep. We have a weekly newsletter that's been going out for every Monday for over 7 years, never missed a Monday. So really love the readership there. So if anyone wants some just free information on sleep every single week, please, hop on there. And then we also have a large scale database with Oura Ring. So we've had a Teams dashboard set up with them for many, many years, almost a decade now. And so that's been, fantastic because then we get to on the ground see what are some of these things that really truly move the needle for people with their sleep. Not just like a guesstimate, but to see what can really measurably transform not just those sleep results, but also aspects of health and well-being, like nervous system indicators, like heart rate variability, like heart rate, like your body temperature, blood oxygen, respiratory rate, etc. So all of these things, it really helps to underscore that while sleep might be kind of the first avenue in, it can really act as this Trojan horse to spider into all other areas of your life. And we are struggled to find a single area of life that's not impacted when your sleep isn't working. But on the bright side, when you bring workability to this area, we positively see it kind of domino into these other areas of life. So I feel like I hit the jackpot on topics to discuss and give my life to, because you never are done. And people are like, are you done talking about sleep? No, I am not done talking about sleep, because it touches every area of life. I mean, you talked about my husband, Blake, who studies people, really, so studying interpersonal communication, emotional regulation, reading faces, etc. All of those things are impacted by your sleep. If you are not well slept, we have studies to support that you likely missing the boat on some of the intentions behind people's communications or your own kind of being misinterpreted, etc. So it's often surprising how many areas of life are impacted by this one piece.
Yeah, that's so huge. And so you talked about, there's a few things there. One, you mentioned how you go see a doctor or you talk to someone and it's like the first step or the second becomes pills, pharmaceuticals, scripts. And I think that's the frustration we have, right, with so much of how there's so many great things about Western medicine and living in this country and like that, what we have access to. And then there's, if you talk to anyone about what creates long-term health, no one says, here's the pill. Like everyone talks about get good sleep, eat right, have exercise, those things. And it's like, but there's this huge lack of, as you mentioned, they only get 2 hours around sleep. And I think it's about the same for things like nutrition. Like the things that actually change our health, that actually make us healthy, not just treat a disease that we've created or that has been created by our actions. We get so little of that. And so, what would you say if someone says, I'm struggling with, I'm the first person you mentioned, I'm struggling for whatever reason with just getting to a baseline. Like I have sleep anxiety, I'm not sleeping well. Like what's the low hanging fruit there that we start with to kind of level set when we don't want to go a pharmaceutical route?
Yeah, so good. Well, in the United States, it is supposed to be cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia because it has such high efficacy. Loads of studies on its ability to support really transforming your sleep because it is hitting at many angles. So it's hitting at, for instance, sleep regularity. There's such intense focus on the consistency of your sleep, namely your wake up time, so that you're waking up around 7 days a week at about the same time, plus or minus around 30 minutes. And I really emphasize the wake up time because our bedtime, we don't always have that control. Like when I was spiraling in Stressville, the ability to count on being able to fall asleep at a particular time was also stress inducing because then I'm like, oh no, I was supposed to be asleep at 10 and now it's 11 and now it's 11:20 and the spiral can come about. Especially we do see that there tends to be a type of person that deals with insomnia, not exclusively, but there seems to be enough so that there has been out of different pieces of sleep research pointing to a prevalence for things like perfectionistic tendencies, some sort of black and white thinking, or, kind of rumination patterns, et cetera, et cetera. So all that to say that when we bring in something like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, there's all kinds of things that are bundled within there that help address whether from this, kind of old school sleep hygiene perspective, that you're kind of cleaning up sort of the workability of your sleep, the management of your sleep, both by day, so kind of daytime hygiene, and then your sleep hygiene. So the management of that, the belief patterns of that, the thought patterns of that, all are kind of addressed with CBT-I. Now, I will say I was one of the people that was not able to thrive with CBT-I because one of the things that CBT-I speaks to is the power of stimulus control. And stimulus control is when you just keep your bed for sleep and sex and that you're not bringing about all of these hours or what have you, long stretches of time of lying awake in bed. So the recommendation is, okay, you've been awake for whatever, around 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't feel like you're going to be falling asleep anytime soon. So you are getting up and out of bed and then just kind of roaming around the house or go find yourself like another chair or something to sit in and do something relaxing for that stretch of time until sleepy again. Then you go back into bed and then test it out again. If you do not fall asleep, then you do the whole thing one more time. Now, I was doing this as the overthinker, the anxious among us. And then I'm like, well, okay, well, now I'm not tired. And now I'm out here and I don't want to be folding laundry, reading this stupid book, doing these different things. So I'd be fighting it. I would be overly strategizing. Well, how long have I been out here? "Ugh, I don't how long can I keep doing this? This is maddening, yada, yada." So one thing that I've seen over the years is a bit of a Venn diagram where we bring in both cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, some of those principles, but then a kind of softening of something a little bit newer, which is ACT or ACT-I, acceptance commitment therapy for insomnia, which is a little bit more gentle. And really, at its base, it's about accepting the fact that during this period of our lives, we might be struggling with our sleep and, to make peace with it versus the fighting, the kind of Chinese finger trap of like try to force ourselves to sleep. Because as we've often seen, forcing sleep is, going to just keep you more stuck. So ACTI or ACT is powerful in that it might offer, and if you're really frustrated, totally, sure, get out of bed, go kind of get a reset. But sometimes we might be kind of like right in between there and we feel relaxed and comfy staying in bed and we don't want to get up and do whatever. So that's an opportunity to kind of practice relaxation. And in that relaxation, this was a big transformation for me, was the concept to allow myself to get the sense that I'm actually getting restoration by laying in bed for that stretch of time. While it might not be as great as actual sleep, you can still mentally say, okay, well, I'm giving my body the gift of restoration and restoring by laying here quietly, eyes closed in a darkened room, relaxing, slowing my breathing, just all is well type energy, and that can still support the body. So that kind of can lessen the stranglehold on trying to force sleep to come. So I'd say those two merged together have been kind of a newer approach to management of insomnia or sleep anxiety. If people want a book or two, I do like the Sleep Book by Guy Meadows that speaks to sleep anxiety. And that one can be quite helpful. There's another one, The Gift of the Night, which helps to kind of reframe that there's actually, dare I say, a gift available during this period of time. And that is absolutely what happened for me. While despite the fact that during it was so maddening, and we do see, sadly, suicidality rates go up during periods of insomnia. We see just, depression, anxiety, all of these things can really augment when we're not sleeping consistently. At the same time, I see for myself and so many others that commonly there's a gift available if we kind of reframe, because the body is saying that something is not working. Oh, we've got to make some real changes in our lives. Do we need to get out of the relationship that's not working? Are our finances a mess? Are we not moving our bodies? What is happening? So it really forces introspection in a lot of ways.
I think it's so powerful because that's I know when I've really struggled with it, it's been, it makes sense during periods of high stress.
Yeah.
Or when, my habits have been great, right? Like, oh, I did have an energy drink after lunch. Like, oh, I'm an idiot, so then you just lay there like,
Yeah,
well, I guess this is my penance, right? Like, let's not do that again. And I think another thing that you talk about mindset, there is, and feel free to tell me if I'm completely off on this, because one thing that I read years ago that really helped me was around, around not being so obsessed with like the 8-hour sleep in a single night, but more thinking about sleep on over like a 7 or 10 day, I think it was like basically REM cycles over a 7-day period as opposed to a single night REM cycle. And that's like, so even if I get less today, like you sort of can make up for it later, as opposed to what I was always told before was like, you can't make up sleep. Like you either get it, you did it. Science that up, like, Mollie that up for me. Like, what is that actually? What's the actual truth in that?
That's so good. 100%. Well, to what you're speaking to, there's so much power in that because it speaks to the wisdom of the body, but from a literal perspective, that we can measure that commonly if the body has been withheld from certain types of sleep, then it will just greedily go after that in subsequent nights when it's available for it. So examples of this are things like when we might take THC, for example, which tends to suppress REM. And then we have this whole REM rebound effect when THC is no longer present for your sleep. So it demonstrates that when kind of the gates are held and REM is not able to kind of flow in the same way, that when you remove that dam, whatever is blocking that, then we see a whole rush of REM kind of come back in. This can actually be a little problematic when people are dealing with quickly getting off things like THC and suddenly they're having all these dreams because Now it had been restricted, the amount of REM that they were getting, and now they're getting a ton of it. And sometimes it's stressful, but just the knowledge, this is where sleep is a skill, because once we start knowing some of these things that, oh, okay, this is just a short-term period of time while the body kind of gets back what it was deprived of, and it will return to more of an equilibrium thereafter. But it just is kind of, going after what it has not been able to have. And so same rules apply with sleep deprivation, whether by choice or inadvertently with amount of stress and just kind of laying there or whatever. So what we see is that on the first half of the night, if you're having trouble falling asleep or you're just not going to bed at your normal time or what have you, that tends to lob off more of your deep sleep. And so deep sleep, because the body does try to stay on time. So you're going to kind of miss out on some of that deep sleep on those type of nights. But then on the nights where you're struggling to stay asleep and you're waking up all throughout the night, fragmented sleep, or now you're just waking up and now you're just up for the rest of the night, that is going to cut into some of that REM. The great thing is that, to your point, the body, once that begins to restore and you're kind of getting back to your normal amounts of sleep, then you are able to kind of make up for some of that lost time. However, I will say there is call out that if night after night, week after week, month after month, year after year, the body can only make up for so much. So there is going to be some of those ramifications for that missed sleep. So that's why there's kind of this two-part answer to that. So I think from a short-term perspective, absolutely. But if it becomes chronic, that's where we want to seek out support, because all of us are going to have acute periods of time where we're stressed, something happens, whatever, pain or something is keeping us up. All of us are going to have some period of that. But if we are starting to see it spill over into this chronic piece, that's where we want to really seek out some new ways of handling things so we don't start having some of those long-term deleterious effects. One of the reasons why we're starting to see so much more press around sleep in general is that in 2012, the discovery of glymphatic drainage with a G was made. And glymphatic drainage with a G is really that cleansing of the brain on the first half of the night primarily. And that's cleansing out some of that amyloid beta plaque that seems to be building up throughout the course of the day into the night. Now, when we look at brains that have a lot of amyloid beta plaque, that's commonly demonstrated in things like neurodegenerative disorders, Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. So this was like big news, because then it was like pointing to what appears to be a correlation between sleep deprivation and an uptick in your likelihood of developing some of those things.
Super interesting. The takeaway there would be, when you're saying that your body sort of makes up for that, if you lose your deep sleep in the early stage, it'll sort of like steal some of that later, or REM the other way, is if we have that, if we're in the moment and it's like, oh crap, I'm having trouble for whatever reason sleeping tonight, and that starts to create that anxiety, is the thought then, okay, it's okay, I still am going to go to bed and wake up at the same time every night this week and my body will make up for it? Or is there an attempt to try to create increased total of quantity of sleep after maybe you've missed some one night?
I'm so glad you pointed to that. Lots of new research, even in the past couple years, have pointed to, if you're up against this question of, do I sleep in longer to get more sleep, or do I wake up at about my consistent time, even if that means less sleep than I might think I need or what have you? Much of the research is pointing to always vote for taking the steps of sleep regularity and maintaining that same closest to bedtime, closest to wake up time, even if that meant that you only got not a lot of sleep that night before, which can feel paradoxical. But the equalizing effect that kind of comes together as you maintain that consistent circadian rhythm to get ourselves back to being sleepy at around the same time that subsequent night or nights after, then that part seems to be even more important than just, one-off of getting all this sleep. Oh, let me sleep 10 hours tonight to make up for the 4-hour night that I got last night. That's just going to create all this havoc on our clocks. And there are clocks in virtually every cell and organ in our body, and they are desperately trying to stay on time. But unfortunately, so much of what we're doing day in, day out, and the choices we make around bedtime, wake time, etc., are confusing these clocks. And we have the opportunity to kind of realign these. And the old 8-hour myth is definitely a myth, in that we see instead more of this U-shaped curve. And the U-shaped curve really points to The emerging recommendation now for a healthy adult is between 7 to 9 hours. But even with the 7 to 9 hours, this U-shaped curve points to all these data points of healthy adults that might sleep a little bit less than 7 hours, might sleep a little bit more than 9 hours, and yet are demonstrating that that's part of their sleep need. Now, I will say with that U-shaped curve, it does, as we further move ourselves from that U shape, then we do start to see more problems when we go way below 6 hours consistently or way above, say, 10 hours consistently. Both of those have problems on either side. So there is kind of a coupling or kind of connection to that 7 to 9 hours spilling over. But instead, I think one of the big things that happens with sleep anxiety is so paradoxical is that we want to actually get okay with the fact that, all right, people all the time sleep only a number of hours. Okay, they've got like a new parents or whatever are getting only 5, 6 hours, whatever they're getting. And they're able to make it through the day. And then when we start to have it for ourselves, like, okay, I've been here before. Maybe I don't love it, but I can get through this day, and removing that pressure and helping to not overly glorify these numbers of sleep, because that's one of the problems, this fine line with wearables and kind of the gamification of these things is that if we start to overemphasize, oh, I got to have this certain number of hours, as if we're fragile and can't handle some of these one-off nights. And the last thing I'll say about that is we had 2 times on the podcast, one of the sleep coach for the Olympics and doctor, researcher, all kinds of accolades, really well known in the sleep world. And one of the things that he pointed to is sleep banking, with the concept. And really, it's kind of just like you're prioritizing sleep in the lead up to something important. And now, of course, for them, it's the Olympics in this case. But for all the rest of us, maybe it's, I don't know, a big event or a talk or a meeting or whatever. And so you want to kind of be at your best. So knowing that you might not sleep great that night before that because of all the nerve, imagine the night before the Olympics, all of this pressure is riding on you and blah, blah, blah. It's almost anticipated that you likely won't sleep great. However, if you banked some of that sleep, the thinking is that you have some of those reserves available for you so you can take off some of that pressure for yourself.
I love that. So, you mentioned like people could be in this sort of range, this sort of bell curve range with maybe the majority, right? Like the center of the bell curve being 8 hours, let's just say, or somewhere around there. And then as individuals, it sounds like what we need to do is and as leaders is figure out where we are on that bell curve. And so what are some indicators or how do we go about the process of finding out like what is good enough sleep and when is it holding back our performance, and how do we start to dial that in so we find out, are we an 8-hour person, a 7-hour person, a 9-hour person? Like, what is it for me?
Yeah. Oh, so good. I would say that often happens where people will think because on those nights where they slept in, and then they got like those 10 hours or whatever, then they think, oh, well, that's what I need because I actually felt decent that day. That must be it. But that is not quite what we're going for. We're going for a stretch of time where you have consistent bedtime, wake time. For the average person, that's going to be a huge breakthrough anyway. To commonly, 7 days a week. So many people will think, oh, well, I'm pretty consistent. And then we look at their sleep data. And yeah, maybe they are consistent 4 days out of the week, 5 days out of the week. But then there's the weekends come or what have you. So when we start bringing about that level of consistency for a stretch, then we remove other things that might be messing with you. So very obvious things. So alcohol, THC, caffeine, the energy drinks you mentioned, but also meal timing, eating too late, not getting ourselves outside, not getting sunlight, not getting too much bright light in the evenings, all of these things. We want to start to remove some of those. Once we get a stretch of time like that, then we also do want to make sure we're testing for sleep disorders. There's over 100 sleep-wake disorders. And so many people have not been tested. And so commonly we see that people are stepping over lots of different types of sleep disorders, whether it's teeth grinding, whether it is mouth breathing, whether it's sleep apnea, upper airway resistance syndrome, restless leg, periodic limb movement disorder, other things that show up that people just often have no clue about. And that's messing with the quality of the sleep that they're getting. And so they might have to compensate as a result or really struggling as a result. So we really just want to kind of sift through some of the problems that might be impacting the quality of that sleep, not to mention the temperature that people are sleeping at. I just recorded a reel where I literally started with don't shoot the messenger. The National Sleep Foundation recommends sleeping between 60 and 67 degrees routinely, and people did not like that. Like some people liked it, but a lot of people did not like that. And I understand. I mean, there's a lot of call out, especially in the midst of crazy temperatures in the summer and the AC bill and what does that all look like, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a great opportunity if we are able to get those temperatures kind of dialed in. But I say all that because there's so many often surprising things that might be hitting at people's sleep that is having them have to sleep more or just feeling really brutal the next day because of all these hits. So as we kind of audit what's working, what's not working, then we experiment and see how much sleep you need from that point and kind of the baseline amount of sleep from there. But for most people, it's removing that yo-yoing, kind of like a crappy night and then an overcompensating, and then kind of normalizing and then crappy night, overcompensating. And all of that is skewing what our actual sleep need is. So people are often surprised once they take all these steps because most people aren't taking these steps. Most people don't even know about so many of these things and just how much of a difference in how they can feel and what's available.
I love that. And you just listed off a bunch of important, tips, skills, right? I mean, sleep skills, right? Things to implement. And so, and we could, hit re-record and start over and do a whole podcast just on like all those things. And everyone's at different spaces, right? Like some people are like, oh yeah, check, got all that. I listened to all the things.
Yeah.
I know the things.
Yeah.
And some people are like, what are you talking about? So if you list it out, like, and I know we're oversimplifying right now, but I want to oversimplify so we can get to the next topics. Like, what are those, I'm that person who's trying to figure that out. And, so I'm like, okay, get up at the same time, go to bed at the same time for 7 days so that I can start to figure out how I feel so I can figure out what my optimal sleep is. And then what are like the other, top 5 things that they should be considering why they do that without going too crazy, but like, what are those low-hanging fruit that they should be doing if they're trying to figure that out?
Yeah, good question.
You mentioned them, but I want to make sure we do a call on them.
Yeah, no, I love that. And just to further shout this part out too, if people haven't had a lot of consistency, they'll be doing that consistency 7 days a week. And even after those 7 days, they're likely still going to need, do another 7 days, do another 7 days, do another, and eventually this will start to become more normal. But for many people, this will already be a breakthrough. But so that's one anchor habit that we speak to is consistent sleep-wake timing. Now, another anchor habit is our clear connection to bright days and dark nights. So what that looks like, and part of the reason for that is that light signals are one of the strongest zeitgebers or time givers for our circadian rhythm. And so it's so important for us to manage our light similar to how we manage our diets, our fitness, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we manage our light, one app that I suggest for people to get is the My Circadian app. And that one will geotag you where you are because it will help kind of understand what time do you need to be outside? How long do you need to be outside? Also based on where you live, but also your skin type. So the Fitzpatrick scale is an important thing to be aware of where do you fall on the Fitzpatrick scale? Because that helps it point to the amount of melanin in our skin. And because of that, if you are on the very dark side of the scale of the Fitzpatrick scale, you need to be out much longer than someone on the very bottom of the Fitzpatrick scale that's super, super pale and is going to be impacted by that sun so much more. And I'm convinced that we're going to see, and we're already starting to see more information rippling in around circadian health, but I believe it's going to be one of the huge next big things in health and wellness because it's such an impactor. It actually transforms every other element down the road of our overall health and well-being because if you're not getting this light right, this impacts one of vitamin D, which is it's called a vitamin, but it's really a hormone. It needs a PR rep or something. And, and it comes from the sun. So what are the benefits from that? And it's not like a one-to-one in just, we'll just supplement that. It's not at all how that works. So unfortunately, or fortunately, it actually behooves us to get ourselves outside. We had Dr. Sachin Panda from the Salk Institute, who has decades of research on circadian health and has found that you need at least about an hour of time outside. And this is a blanket statement, I know, but around that as a ballpark baseline to be able to create sufficient melatonin at night. And this is a big kind of breakthrough, too, to understand that we have subcellular melatonin production in from mitochondria. We used to think of it more as brain based, and that was just coming with the presence of darkness at night. But oddly, you actually, or interestingly, need bright light to make melatonin at night. So this is a big, kind of reframe for so many people, or paradigm shift, because if you're not getting that, like, so right now I'm talking to you, I got this window in front of me, and I got all this light coming in. So I might be like, oh, well, I'm fine. Turns out I'm not fine because I actually do need to go outside because the type of light that is coming through here is adulterated light. So I'm not getting really important parts of the light spectrum. So I'm not getting infrared light. I'm not getting more of some of the benefits of healing components of the light that are available outside, not just from a woo perspective, but biologically. So you want to get brighter days and darker nights. And then you want to shift over to the nights. You can use that same app to measure the lux in your environment. So you want to play a game of like, can I get as much lux as possible in my environment by day? And that's going to be meaning you go outside, because the average indoor environment is going to be usually under about 500 lux versus when you go outside on a summer day, you can get well over 100,000 lux. So the difference is so huge that the body and mind needs this. And hormones are impacted, our mood, our productivity, so many things. So this piece is huge. And then on the flip side, at night, we're trying to get as little lux as possible, really. So post sunset, we're trying to get kind of on par with, say, candlelight, maybe sub around 10 lux or sub 20 lux, so that you're getting really, really low. And that amplitude helps tell the body, okay, we're making melatonin now. We're lowering heart rate. We are calming down, and we're preparing for sleep. So that's that light, dark, and consistent wake time. Those are anchor habits. But then there's all these other ones. So then there's temperature timing. So ensuring that we're getting kind of warmer body temperature by day, markedly cooler by night. We're getting meal timing and type. So we're looking for blood sugar stabilizing options. Continuous glucose monitors can help here, but that they're also aligned with the rhythms of nature. So you're front loading all of your calories or, intake on the first half of the day, and then much less after the sun has set. Then you're looking at things like exercise timing and type. So what type of exercise? We have new research that muscle mass is going to be important for thermoregulation and your ability to get rich sleep. So we do want to kind of go after strong kind of body composition throughout the course of your life. And then we want to, and of course, the timing of that so that we're not going too late on that. There's big studies on the timing piece. And then we have thought timing. It's something I've coined around the timing of your thoughts, because we do have research that your thoughts exist on a circadian rhythm. So you're aiming to kind of keep, those type of thoughts, or be mindful of the content that you're engaging in, the types of paths, types of conversations that you're having, so that you're not having overly excitatory conversations that are activating as we're leading up to going to bed, or certainly in the wee hours of the morning. So we're looking for a lack of novelty in the evenings. So it's not really the time to start the new exciting book, to watch the new exciting Netflix series, to whatever, all these activating things, or plan the big trip, or get in the big fight, or whatever. All of those things are going to be activating. And it turns out that the types of thoughts that we have in those hours tend to be very different than the daytime thoughts. So we see more black and white thinking, kind of more catastrophic thinking. And sadly, it's another instance where suicidality rates go up in the wee hours of the morning, and heightened risk in those hours. So we've got that circadian alignment with our thoughts. And then lastly, I would point to chronopharmacology, or the timing of our drugs. So that can look like as basic and banal as our coffee. What time are we having that? How much? All the way to pharmaceuticals, to supplements, alcohol, THC, et cetera, and now also plant medicines and beyond. And so we're seeing all kinds of things from a pharmaceutical or additive perspective that could also be impacting our sleep.
There's so much there, and I think that two call outs I think are, you mentioned the front loading your food. My wife's always been huge about us eating early.
Yeah.
I will say, it seems what I see a lot of people do is it's the complete reverse, right? They're like,
Yes.
I'm not a breakfast person or whatever,
Yeah.
or I don't have much. And then they'll have some lunch and then their big meal is dinner. What I'm hearing is like, that needs to be switched.
Totally. And listen, I get it. Like, one, I did exactly that. Years back, I would be really so proud of myself for skipping breakfast and how far can I push it? I don't need it. And we see too in the different kind of wellness trends that come about. That for many years it was like that intermittent fasting and what have you. And there does appear to be certain benefits, but we're looking at how can we just kind of flip that. So this is known as circadian rhythm intermittent fasting, just like a really fancy series of words to say we're eating when the sun is out and less so when the sun has set. And if we think about it from an ancestral perspective, it makes a lot of sense. If so much of from like a hunter-gatherer timeline or what have you, when you have the sun up, you only have it up for so many hours. So you'd be operation, get myself fed. And then once the sun has set, there's no pantries, refrigerators, all those things. So it's kind of party over for the eating piece. And we are meant to be really set up so that leptin and ghrelin levels are helping to support us so that we're not wildly starving in the evening leading up to sleep and during sleep. And if you are starving and really dealing with that, that can be a sign that something's up with our circadian health and or kind of blood sugar issues. That's why, Oura Ring just spent millions of dollars linking up with Dexcom so that they can demonstrate just how much your CGM results, your continuous glucose monitor results link up with your sleep results. And so when you overlay those, like their tech will allow you to do, then you can see that all throughout the course of the night, if you're spiking and crashing, then commonly that's going to impact either the quality of your sleep, a bare minimum, or very commonly fragment your sleep. And so you're going to be waking up and now you might be having trouble falling back asleep because now the body has that stress response because of that glucose. So all that to say that, yes, we're looking to front load more. And it does appear that the body is able to handle glucose more effectively on the first half of the day than it does. So like 8 a.m., well, if you have, I don't know, a sandwich, which would be a weird thing at 8 a.m., but you have a sandwich at 8 a.m. and then a same sandwich at 8 p.m., our ability to handle that is much less apt at the 8 p.m. Example. So it kind of flips everything on its head. Like if you're going to have a cheat meal, in a lot of ways, a big old breakfast, there's evidence to support that there will be benefits to that the body can handle some of that. Not to mention that just presumably we still might be moving around, needing this energy for something versus having all of that food right before a little bit of time you're going to be laying down for all those hours. It's just really kind of problematic. And just think about how much work goes into digestion. And so all the blood flow to the stomach and all that goes on there. If we can stave that off so that the body isn't being splintered in its attention, it can really handle all the restoration versus giving it homework right before bed and telling it to now digest all this food when it's really needing to focus on the lymphatic drainage we spoke about and for deep sleep, cellular repair, human growth hormone, for men, testosterone levels, all of these things that can get impacted when we are consistently eating too late. And what we'll see on wearables is often a big uptick in heart rate and a drop in heart rate variability, also an uptick in respiratory rate, commonly way more apneas if people are dealing with sleep apnea or upper air resistance syndrome or snoring. All of those things can commonly way, way, way go up with meal timing errors.
And also, and you may have said it's like glucose in like foods maybe that have more of that. So like basically, if you're going to carbo load in the morning so you can use it during the day, not at night, right? I mean,
Totally.
So I think that's another thing is making sure if you are having dinner, have it early, right? Is what I'm hearing. And then also keep that in sort of the, maybe meat and vegetable heavy and stay out of some of the other carb heavy starches and things.
Yeah, and volume too, because there's this old saying that I'm sure is not politically correct anymore, but it used to be saying eat like a king for breakfast, a queen for lunch, and a pauper for dinner. And so that is pointing to volume of the power of that. So we'll see, because we'll have so many clients, and myself included, that if you've got social engagements, because the rest of society is meeting up at dinners at 7:30, sometimes later if you're at conferences or something or some sort of events. And so the later we are having our dinner, by the time it finally gets to our table and you start diving in, that can really start to dip into your sleep. So instead, if you just have a lower volume, so you have a little bit less of that, or you have things that can be more easily digested, those are all kind of good options to bring in. And that can make a big difference if you're like, well, I want to be able to be a part of society and still be a part of these dinners or whatever. And those can all be kind of some workarounds.
I love that. Man, this has been so good. And we haven't even touched on when it comes to like companies and leading companies. And obviously, basically everything we just said about how sleep is so important for your own performance, like this becomes a performance issue when you talk about creating high performance teams and in companies. So let me just maybe, dig one nugget out of you, one more, which is what's maybe one policy or practice you would love to see more companies adopt to improve employee performance and well-being through better rest?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would like to see, well, a couple things. I think bringing this into the language more. So, for instance, I'll work with different companies and startups and corporations where we'll bring in some of these trainings. And so often that will offer for people Oura rings or Whoop bands or what have you. And so that can get them in the conversation if it's right for them, if it's applicable to their situation, and then educating on some of this. So then it becomes a part of the vernacular in the conversation and the culture. So there's this prioritization and almost gamification where, it works, that now people are, as a group, really prioritizing this and seeing the power of this. So I've seen that be tremendously impactful. But aside from that, if they're in-person workspaces, circadian aligned workspaces would really make my day because people don't realize how much of an impact our environment is. Building biology is going to be a really important emerging area of study because, in estimates out of 2001 from the EPA, which is ages ago, but even in 2001, the average person was spending well over 90% of their days indoors. And that was before a global pandemic, Netflix, work from home revolution, smartphones, all the things. So it's probably like way more, likely way into the high 90s of the time you're spending inside. This is hugely impactful because we are creating mitochondrial just havoc because we absolutely need the presence of bright light outside. We need somewhat controversially grounding practices, which you can even not from like a woo perspective, but from the electrons exchange from the grounding, which is kind of the tech behind like PMF mats and what have you. But you can also get it by being outside in nature. The Japanese have a lot of research too around the power of nature and from a stress reduction perspective. So there's a lot of things that we can pull from our environment, but also just air quality so that we're not dealing with mold, formaldehyde, VOCs, all of these problems of being in a stuck sort of Tupperware-like environment in our newer builds that are great for energy efficiency, but maybe not for well-being. And then just the lighting. We see in hospitals when they start bringing in circadian lighting that patients are more apt to be released from the hospital in quicker time. So they're healing faster, they're recovering faster when they're having, kind of high amplitude circadian difference. So brighter days that blend and spill over into darker nights versus just sort of a static environment. And NASA's known this for many years. They're very serious about dynamic lighting in shuttles, because or space stations, as they're shuttling through, the universe, the galaxies, we're seeing the sun rising and setting around every 90 minutes when this is happening. So they take really seriously aligned circadian health. So they have a whole algorithm that they set these astronauts to be on that are very aligned with the brighter days and darker nights ethos. So if we were to bring all of those things in, then that would really make such a difference. Also, just sleep leadership. So how can we offer events and things that are socializing that are more daytime oriented, healthy oriented, outside, movement heavy, just, kind of demonstrate that that's what we're stand for versus the old school, let's go out to a bar or all these different things that kind of how we used to kind of bond in the past. I think there's an opportunity to demonstrate that it doesn't have to look like that.
They're so huge. And I mean, if I had to wrap this whole thing up, it's if you're listening to this podcast, you're a leader, you're trying to be a leader of yourself, right? Self-leadership first, and then a better leader of your family and your community and work. Sleep, and I'm a firm believer, is like the foundation of all of that performance, of how you show up for all those people in your life, how your longevity, all those things. And so if you want to be a high performance leader, a no limit leader, bringing this into your own practice, taking it seriously, and then bringing it to your organizations is critical. So as people, after they hear this, I know are going to want to do that. And we're going to put as many links as we can. There's so much good detail you put out, but if someone's like, okay, I'm new to this, so hopping on, episode 343 of Sleep is a Skill might work, may not. Like, but where do they go? Like, how do they get Mollie 101 to like get started?
Yeah, so good. So if you go to sleepisaskill.com, we have a sleep assessment that you can just answer a couple of questions about where your sleep is at right now, and that will auto trigger information that you can use right away to help support your sleep, as well as signing up for our newsletter that comes out every Monday, and then also checking out our podcast that has loads and loads of different options based on where you might be at with your sleep. And so kind of sifting through that. And then we're about to be releasing kind of a top lessons learned from all of these podcasts to date. So that will be out very shortly. So that will be potentially a nice place to begin as well. And then if you do wear different wearables, we do have wearable audits. So kind of more of a one-off opportunity to get insight based on what's happening with your actual data. And then from there, we can kind of help course correct you and, take certain steps. And then if you want additional support, then we have one-on-ones that are much more in-depth, lots of testing and things that you can do from there to make a big difference with your sleep over the long term.
Awesome. Well, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for everything you do. And this is such a fun conversation. And like I said, just like after the masterminds, we could end up in the corner doing a 4-hour podcast. So maybe we'll have to do it again.
Exactly. Totally. So fun. Love your commitment to excellence for people and for yourself, and walking the talk. I know you're into all of these things as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to share about this.
Absolutely. Talk again soon. Thanks for being a part of the No Limit Leadership family. This isn't just a podcast. We're building a movement of no limit leaders driven to unlock our greatness and lead the world forward. If this made you think or gave you something useful, please, right now, go hit follow and then share it with one leader you believe in. Challenge limits, develop leaders, fuel greatness.